Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Schatz, and I'm with Technology Assurance Group. I'll be starting off the webinar here today. We do have John Schweitzer from ConnectWise joining us here, and he's having a little bit of audio trouble here. So my name is Tim Schatz, what I mentioned there. I also have John Ekstrom, who's President and CEO of CBE out in South Carolina, who will be joining us to present a little towards the end there as well. So welcome again. A couple housekeeping items that we want to mention. If you can't hear us, try increasing your device volume or clicking on audio settings and see if you can resolve it that way. We are going to be doing questions at the end, but we have quite a few attendees. So if you can submit questions in the questions panel on the GoToMeeting portal there, we'll actually read those and try to answer as many as we can towards the end. Look for links related to content mentioned during the webinar in the chat box. And we always get the question, well, will this webinar be recorded? The answer is absolutely yes, and you will have access to that recording within, I believe, a day or so that will be shared by John or someone over at ConnectWise. So welcome again. All right. So first thing we always try to go through here is who is TAG? Who are we and why are we here? Well, we are an association of managed technology service providers. We call ourselves MTSPs. We were formed in 1998, been around just coming up on, sorry, my apologies there, coming up on 23 years. And our members, our clients, we call them members, are in the business of providing technology to end users and small businesses around the country. And that those folks deal with managed IT, cloud technologies, cybersecurity, telephony or telecommunications, AV video surveillance, access control, connectivity, and then managed print copiers, office equipment as well. We have members throughout the US and Canada. We have approximately 136 marketplaces being served, doing roughly $600 million in goods and services and servicing around 600 to 650,000 small businesses. So TAG members benefit from programs. We drive recurring revenue and we drive profitability primarily. So we teach ways of increasing your recurring revenue. And for whatever we sell, obviously, we want it to be as profitable as possible. And we have programs to drive sales growth as well. So the services that we offer are really a kind of a well-rounded, almost a business school for entrepreneurs. We like to think of ourselves, if it touches your business, we have better practices related to it. So things like sales training, sales management, the financial analysis and budgeting, which is really primarily in my corner. I do quite a bit of that with our TAG members. We teach better practices on operations management, marketing and lead generation, human resources, interviewing employees, personality analysis, aptitude testing, just to make sure we put the right folks on the bus in the right place, right? And then mergers and acquisitions as well, which is also in my corner, where we do have certain members that are potentially looking to acquire a competitor in their market space or a complementary technology. We will typically help with that as well. We do professionally led peer groups, so we manage the agenda and make sure we have time well spent when owners can get together and compare best and better practices. We do public relations. We help with strategic planning, customer experience and customer management, mentoring and coaching of employees. So if you have employees that are potentially on the up and coming employees that may be part of upper management someday, we do quite a bit of training and coaching with those folks as well. So not just owners, not just upper management. We do that with pretty much any employees that have the need. We have exit strategies and succession. A lot of folks, as they're coming up on potentially retirement, not sure what to do with their business, we can help them with either finding a way to exit their business and sell it or pass it on to either a family member or trusted manager, management team, so that that business continues. And lastly, we're a cooperative buying group, so we do have arrangements with providers and use the weight of our channel and our buying power to hopefully obtain better pricing, better discounts, better rebates than you might be able to obtain with some of these providers if you were to go to them on your own. Lastly, TAG owns an MSP ourselves. So we're an award-winning MTSP called iNet, and we're located in Southern California. So our theory is that we walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So the concepts you're going to see today are actually in practice at our own dealer that is also a TAG member. Okay. So let's get on to the agenda. So we're going to talk a few things today. If any of you were on our webinar approximately 2 months ago, I want to say it was May, where we talked a little bit about pricing properly to obtain proper profitability. Some of the concepts we're going to talk about today are similar to what we discussed in that webinar. But we'll start off with contribution and bottom line EBITDA. We'll define those terms for you, and then talk about, well, what is possible? What kind of contribution, let's say, put it this way, what kind of gross margins, contribution, and bottom line profitability is really attainable in the IT space, and particularly with managed services. We'll talk a little bit about recurring revenue and how important that is, proper staffing, having the right number of people for the amount of business that you service. And then within that, the efficiency of that technical staff that you have under your management. Proper pricing of our bundled services is obviously key as well. And then I'll run through a pricing example, which gives us the ability to kind of put that, those concepts into real numbers. So first thing we want to talk about is how much should managed services, bundled services, contribute? And when we say contribution, this is what we mean. We want to make sure everyone's clear on what we're talking about. Contribution is the amount of money we have left over after we pay for all of our cost of goods sold and all of our sales expenses to bring that business to bear, but before we pay any overhead. MSP sales should contribute approximately 35% before we pay overhead. Some of you may have 10 or 12% of sales going to overhead. Some of you may have 25% going to overhead. It really depends on your size, how scaled you are, what part of the country you're in, to determine kind of what your individual overhead burden is. But if you're maintaining a 35% contribution before we talk about any overhead, then you are doing it about as well as it can be done in the business. If we have 35% contribution, if we take a reasonably well-performing overhead of 15%, we believe that in managed services, we should be able to put 20% EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, essentially your operating profit, really the money left over before, from all your buying and selling of your goods and services, but before you pay for any interest or debt or depreciation items that are really not operationally related. So we believe you should be able to put 20 points in profitability to the bottom line, and that is also including owner's salary. Sometimes that gets excluded, but in our 20%, we also include expenses to account for a reasonable owner's salary. So the primary metrics for the managed services sector, first one obviously is pricing our managed services bundle. We'll get into that a little later to talk about how important that is. And then the other part of it is the people. So price and people are really the two most important things when we talk about managed services. And it sounds simple, obviously, but it is pretty complicated to get those two things at the correct levels so that we obtain maximum profitability. So we want to talk about proper staffing levels and the productivity of that technical staff. And then the third leg of the stool, I like to call it, is really recurring revenue. We want to build our recurring revenue to the point where it exceeds all of the costs in the business except for hardware that we purchase for resale, except for product purchases. So every other cost in the business, rent, utilities, every single employee, all the OPEX, all the sales expenses, every single dollar of expense is covered on day one when you collect that recurring revenue. So recurring revenue is what we're going to start with here. Why is it so beneficial? Well, obviously everyone perceives recurring revenue to be extremely important, really because it's stable and dependable revenues. We know we have money coming in next month, whereas with transactional business, if we have a big project in Q1 and do really well, we got to go out. Can we redo it again and sell another project or another system, some other transitory single set of income project revenue that we can repeat in Q2 and Q3 and Q4, whereas obviously recurring, we know we can count on something. So we don't have to go out and reinvent our business every quarter or every month with finding, proposing, closing, and then performing the services that we contract for on a one-off basis, right? We don't have to go out and reinvent our business every month or every quarter. When we get recurring revenue in excess of cost, we achieve a profit breakthrough. And I've noticed this because it's a unique identifier for every single MSP that is on the higher end of the profit scale. So we jokingly call this nirvana. We get this profit breakthrough when basically everything we do becomes slightly more profitable. And this occurs when obviously the revenue exceeds all costs to run the business except for hardware purchases. So why is this so important to us and why we notice it and want to bring it to your attention? And the thought is this: what if you were at that stage where you've got all your costs covered in the business and then you go out and you sell just one more hour of labor? If you sold one more hour of billable time, how much would drop to the bottom line? Essentially all of it, right? Because if we go out and bill another, say, just $150 for an hour of project labor, we've already paid for our overhead. We've already paid for the salary of that employee, the taxes, the insurance, anything you consider labor burden. It's all already covered. So if I go out and sell one more hour of labor, that whole 150 really drops to the bottom line and makes increases our profitability. So all of it goes to the bottom line unless we were perfectly absorbed, let's say, and have to pay some overtime to supply that hour of labor, right? And then how much of a new MSP contract? If we go out and we sign a new customer with 10 or 15 seats and a few servers, 100% of that income is going to go to the bottom line, but for the hard cost of the outsource, and then perhaps any sales expense we might encounter for the salesperson who brought that in. So all of a sudden, what we sell after we've achieved this nirvana stage that we call it is going to go straight to the bottom line. It's kind of like the concept of the rich get richer. The folks that are profitable all of a sudden become much more profitable on just about everything they sell because they've hit that critical mass. So we look at it as the 80-20 rule. It's very, very true in business, that 80% of the sales typically come from 20% of your salespeople. 80% of your revenues are likely coming from 20% of your customers, your big customers, that really drive the majority of your sales. And the same is true here. So what we do is we look at what is possible to be done by the best 20% of tag members in terms of the folks that we're analyzing and see what is possible for profitability. And the top 20% of tag members routinely do more than 25 points of bottom line EBITDA. Our top record, our top performing member that's part of our group does almost 40%. And they're an example of, kind of putting this nirvana concept on steroids. So they do very, very well. All the tag members that are above that 25% model have achieved this nirvana stage. So they have grown recurring revenue across the board, not just in IT, but in anything they sell, whether it's surveillance and security, in office equipment and copiers, in telephony. They're able to build this strong base of recurring revenues, and it has pushed their profitability up, over time to probably the best in the industry. When I say the best in the industry, the tag members that come in typically are doing roughly 5 to 7% bottom line profits, and that is the standard for the IT industry in general. So we believe that the 5, 7, 10% is not what the maximum potential is for your business. So recurring revenue, the whole point of this is we say that recurring revenue as a factor of those total costs in the business is a metric we should regularly track. If our cost to run the business but for product purchases is, let's say, $100,000 a month, and our recurring revenue is $60,000 a month, all right, well, we have some work to do, but at least we know where we stand. And I guarantee you that once you hit that point where your recurring revenue covers, day one, you open the doors on the first of the month, every cost that you're going to incur that month is already covered. At that point, you will become a lot more profitable in the future business that you bring to bear. So, technician productivity. How much time should our technicians be productive? We pay them 40 hours a week, 2,080 hours a year. How much time of that should they be productive? Well, I think first we have to kind of define what we mean by productive. What is that? We call it deployed. We need our technicians deployed, which in our parlance means they're actively engaged with a paying customer. It may be a customer that's paying you for hourly work, let's say project labor. It may be a customer that's covered under some sort of a maintenance agreement for a technology or a MSP contract in the IT space. So whether they pay you monthly, whether they pay you hourly, doesn't matter, but this is a paying customer. And when they're engaged with a paying customer, we call that deployed. And this is typically broken down very, very simply into these kind of 4 activities. If a technician is on site working on an issue or working on an installation, that is deployed time, obviously. If we're working remotely to resolve something from a remote help desk standpoint, that is also considered deployed in service of a paying customer. Then we have other things that are basically the preparation, material gathering. Let's say if we're going out for a large installation and we need to make sure we've got everything before we go out there, that does take time. So gathering, stocking up a truck to go out there and do the work that you've been engaged to do. And then the actual travel time. So really, when you break it down, no matter what you're selling, if those 4 activities are happening, we consider that time spent in service of a customer that is paying us. Any other time that's not one of those 4, even if it's useful time, even if it's what we would call, productive time, we're going to put that in a downtime bucket. Why are we going to do that? Well, because we've defined it, productive time and deployed time, as time spent in service of a paying customer. If they're not servicing a paying customer, what other things are they doing? Well, we have to account for costs that we provide for things like vacation and holidays, PTO, sick days, right? We pay the technicians for that time, and that is part of our cost. So any time that we spend, those PTO, holiday, sick day type of pay is going to be obviously considered downtime, because that's definitely not in service of a paying customer. But then we have the things that I mentioned that are potentially useful. We want our technicians to be trained. So if they're training on our time, that's useful. That's good time well spent. But again, it's not customer facing. So training time or meetings. We do have company meetings, technicians, let's say operations department meetings, and that is time. If we do a half-hour meeting every Monday to go over the agenda for the week, that's half an hour a week that is not going to be customer facing, right? And then there's time when it's just slow. We know that our business does not always come in exact increments. It comes in waves. So we do have days and we do have weeks sometimes where we're between projects and there's not a lot of remediation needs that are coming in from our customers. So we just have plain old downtime, right? So all that is time that we spend and we pay our technicians to not be productive. So we always look at this, and the long-standing metric in the industry is 75% of the total time paid. We would like for 75% of that time that we pay them to be engaged in servicing a paying customer, and the other 25% would be some amalgam of those other issues or there times that come up where we're training, we're in meetings, we're potentially working on the local network at your business, we have PTO, we have just plain old downtime. Everything that's not deployed would be in that other bucket of what we would call downtime. So what does that mean? Well, that means for every 1,000 hours we pay an employee, we're probably going to get, really best case scenario, we're going to get about 750 customer-facing hours. And the hard part is that we can't really manage individual productivity in that manner. Just about all of us, in our experience, we pay technicians as a full-time salaried or full-time hourly role. So you can't necessarily send people home when things are slow and bring them back when you have a job for them. Very rarely that is the case, but in IT, that's not the norm. So we can't really manage folks by the hour. We have a certain amount of hours that we pay them annually, and it's up to us as the owners and the managers to make sure we have filled their plate and they have enough business to keep them busy for that 75% of the time. Because what can we control? Well, we can control headcount. Headcount is really an employee is plus or minus 2,080 hours a year. If we have too many employees, we can let attrition happen. If somebody was to resign or move on, we just don't replace them, right? Or hopefully we don't have to do this terribly often, but in some cases we may need to lay an employee off. So we can control our head count. That really means we can only control plus or minus 2,080 hours a year for a full-time equivalent. The other thing we can control is sales volume. So if we have, let's say, more capacity in our technicians team, we really have the choice to either decrease that number of people, or we know we have greenfield in front of us. We can go add new business and ideally would not have to hire more employees. So we can actually go out, sign a few more customers, provide more revenues to the company, and keeping the headcount at the same. And I find this is one of the hardest things we do in business, to be honest with you. When do we hire? When do we know when it's time to hire the next employee? And my theory is that we really truly do that mostly based on how busy we feel. If we're all working overtime, working hard, we don't have a single minute of the day, we feel like we must be understaffed and we must need to hire. What we do with this is we provide a revenue-based and, let's say, volume-based projection of how many employees we should have. And if we have too many, or if we have more staff and more capacity than business, then at least we know one thing. We know we don't have the need to go higher. We should have additional capacity available to bring on more business. So that's kind of the theory between staffing and business. We need to know how many employees we need to service basically the number of endpoints, number of servers, and number of ancillary product we have out there in the field that we're managing. So we can really only manage the headcount. We can't manage hours, and we must pay all productive technicians for 40 hours a week, 2,080 hours a year for full-time work, right? So it's very, very difficult and very rare that we would ever be able to supplement with part-time employees, because typically it doesn't lend itself to that. So this means that individual productivity is very difficult to manage. Typically, technicians will do the amount of work that we put in front of them. So we're really measuring the potential productivity of revenue that we can essentially hand to them per hour, in whether that's T&M, time and materials, hourly work, which we also include project labor in that, and then the hours that we spend in a monthly recurring revenue managed services program. So we want to measure deployed, which is those four areas. Is my technician on site? Are they working remotely? Are they doing some sort of prep or gathering of materials for a job? Or are they traveling to and from an actual job site? If they're doing those activities for any type of paying customer, 75% of the time, then we're doing it about as well as we can do in the business. So we manage this by, if we're not exactly at the right place, we can either increase our sales to fill their plate fully, or we can decrease headcount. And I found many times where MSPs believe that they're fully absorbed, that they absolutely couldn't, could not take on any more business, and we come to analyze and show that they're somewhat overstaffed. And what typically happens is, let's say they have a technician that retires, or let's say leaves to take another position. So they end up going down by one person, and magically all the existing business gets handled, and they're able to absorb the existing workload among one less technician. So even when we think we're fully absorbed and we don't have a spare minute, a lot of times that's not the case, that we can certainly get down to this level of staffing that we believe is adequate. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We'll talk about the managed services sector pricing, and we want to talk about pricing the managed IT. And some of you may remember this if you were on our webinar 2 months ago, that proper pricing, no matter where you are in the country, no matter what you perceive your local market to be, we have to make sure we price in a manner that allows us to make our proper profitability. We need to make the right gross margins, the right contribution after we include sales expense, and the right bottom line EBITDA, net profit, operating profit, after all the OPEX, all the overhead, and owner salary. If we don't price it, it's almost impossible to dig your way out of that. It's almost impossible to overcome that underpricing through just being really good at what you do, or through cutting costs in other areas. When we underprice, we essentially give the customer what we would have made in profit, and then we break even on that managed services offering, or worse, maybe we're actually a little bit upside down. So I always say it this way, that, if you're underpricing, if you're pricing it properly, you can do a lot of things wrong and still be somewhat profitable. You can be not as efficient as you should be, and you can make some mistakes. If you're underpricing, you can do everything perfect and still not make money. So we have hard costs that have to be covered, period, the end. We have outsource items for cybersecurity, for Office 365, for help desk from like a ConnectWise, where we have, let's say, outsourced help desk or server management. We have BCDR solutions. All that stuff carries a hard cost. And if we take the hard costs and a conservative labor estimate of what it takes to service that customer from our own labor, we really must price it properly, because those costs are really not going to change. So when we sell labor by the hour, we sell it as a fixed price, and we know how many hours it takes because we bill for each hour that we sell. If it takes 5 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours to do whatever remediation work, if it's a customer that's being billed by the hour, we know how many hours it took because we bill them for it. Whereas the opposite is true when we sell our labor as part of a managed services bundle. The managed services bundle, we sell an unknown number of hours for a fixed price. And some months we might have a few hours to spend servicing one of our clients, one of our customers. Next month it might be 10 or 20 because something went wrong, right? So we have to price it in a manner where over time we make enough money to cover those hills and valleys of labor deployment and still make money overall. So with outsourced services, I always say this is we want to look at it two ways. In some cases, we outsource our primary help desk, and those are things like Continuum, which is now ConnectWise, or I believe it's GSM, or some other places where you can have them take the help desk and the server management, or you can do that in-house. We don't have time to go into both, but the model I'm going to discuss today is an outsource model where you basically only take in-house the overflow, the excess, anytime a ticket gets escalated and a help desk, an outsourced help desk can't handle it, they kick it back to you, right? So that's the scenario that we're discussing with this example. So the first thing we need to determine is which functions are we going to outsource? And in that case, most of the time we're going to outsource. If we're going to outsource labor, we're going to do it with server management and the help desk. So therefore, our internal employees are really only going to take anything that requires an on-site visit or an escalated problem that the initial call can't be solved with the help desk. But we also have other products that are considered outsourced. And these are things, anything that we buy and sell from a third party is considered an outsourced product. We don't necessarily produce our own, let's say, BCDR solutions, which is backup continuity and disaster recovery. Those backup solutions are typically we buy that from someone else and resell it to our customers. We have anti-spam, anti-malware, cybersecurity products, Office 365. Those are all products that we simply pick up from an outside source and we bring to our customers. So we must mark up those outsourced services at a 2.0 because we need to attain a broad estimate of 50% gross margin. Now, I know what you're going to say, Tim, we absolutely do not get 50% gross margin on all those products, and I get that. The worst offender being Office 365. We get a few points on that, and there's really not much else. But what we mean here is that on average, there are some products that we get better than a 50% gross margin, and there's some that we get less. But on average, if we can price in a manner that the total outsource cost is roughly 50% of what we're building into our bundle, then we should be in good shape. So this is an overall metric, not that we have to mark up every single product we sell a 2.0. We need to take an average of our outsourced products, and if we're close to a 50% gross margin on those products, we should be in the right place. So then next, we have to try to predetermine how many hours am I going to spend to service this customer. If a customer has, let's say, in my example coming up, we're going to talk about 20 PCs and a couple of servers, how many hours do I need to budget each month that I'm going to have my internal technical resources pay attention to those folks, right? So we have to first, how many hours is it going to take to service these PCs and these servers? And then once we figure out that, then we have to determine how much are we going to charge per hour? How much in dollars should we be billing for those hours? If I estimate it's going to take 10 hours a month, is that 10 hours at my loaded labor rate? Is that 10 hours at my retail, billable rate? We're going to talk about that and show you as well. So those are the two things we need to build in. Ultimately, we have to have the right margins on our outsourced products, and we have to build in properly estimated number of hours at the proper amount to charge to get to the right number we should bill a customer. So I won't go into how we get these metrics because we don't have the time, but basically the metrics that we've come up with is that if for any PCs under management that are primarily serviced by an outsource, we're going to have some level of escalations and problems that come back to us. So if we're outsourcing, we would recommend budgeting roughly 10 minutes per PC under management. And for servers, roughly half hour. This would be different if we're doing all in-house help desk and in-house server management with all our own employees. But in this case, we're assuming that some number of the service calls are really going to go to our outsource and get handled there. For the escalations and maybe things that require an on-site visit, we still have to build that into what we're going to bill the customer because that is time that we're going to have to spend. So for the PCs, roughly 10 minutes. For the servers, roughly a half an hour per server under management. And then we're going to budget an hour a month for a quarterly business review. That's what a QBR is. We're going to meet with the customer quarterly and review their IT environment, go over any reporting, go over any issues, that kind of thing. Well, that's roughly 3 hours a month to gather the information, prepare the reporting, and then go meet with the customer. And that time is not free. We are going to build that into our model as well because that is time we're going to spend servicing the customer. So if we budget the right number of hours, then we recommend including that a rate at a minimum of $140 per hour. And if we do that, we should recognize roughly a 50% gross margin on those hours. So this assumes that we have an average technician rate of around $30 an hour. Yours might be more, yours might be less. But when we have a $30 average technician rate, when we look at the entire cost of the operations department, that is the cost of the technicians, the dispatcher, project manager, project coordinator, ops manager, all of the labor load, the taxes, the benefits, the insurance on those folks, other things like vehicles, training, cell phones, all the costs to run that operations department, we've determined that if it's $30 an hour average technician rate, it's going to cost about $70 all in across the entire operations department to deliver 1 hour of labor. $70 an hour of rough and dirty cost. We believe that the minimum charge we should build into our offering is $140, which is 50% gross margin. So if we're outsourcing MSP services, outsourcing at least the help desk support, we need to get a 50% gross margin on both our own labor and our outsourced services. If we do this, we do it by getting a 2.0 markup on the outsourced services and by realizing roughly $140 in minimum rate on our properly budgeted manpower hours that we're going to spend from our own employees. If we do that, basically then we have 50% gross margins. We'll land at 35% contribution, assuming a budget of approximately 15% of sales going to sales costs. And then 20% EBITDA, assuming that you're among the top performers in getting 15% roughly in overhead costs. And again, most of us are going to be more, probably 20, 22, 23%. But it's okay because ideally, as you scale, you'll grow into a lower overhead number. Really, the top 20% are the ones that can achieve 15% overhead level, and it's very difficult to get it any lower than that most of the time. So recurring revenue is our one leg of the stool. We need to properly price our bundled services, and then we need to look at the productivity of our technical staff and make sure we're achieving 75% uptime or deployed time or better, and we're achieving a realized labor rate of approximately $140 an hour. Now, in our analysis that we do of our members' financials, there's quite a bit more that goes into the metrics for deployed staff and technicians, analyzing a labor profile of how many technicians should we have given the amount of business that we're servicing, and we do all of that. So this is just one. There's certainly plenty more to discuss when it comes to pricing, and there's plenty more to discuss when it comes to proper staffing and efficiency and measurement of that staff to make sure that you're in the right place. So we kind of just want to talk about a couple of these concepts today. So quick pricing example, and then we'll get into some questions. Let's say we have 20 employee companies. Each one of those employees has a PC, 2 servers, and we're going to price up a full service managed services offering. And we're also going to include some ancillary services. In this case, we're going to talk about not just doing managed services, but we're going to add all the cybersecurity features that we would typically want to include in this day and age, of course. So how would we do that? This is a very, again, broad example, and every single proposal is going to be a little different. But ballpark of how we would get there is first we would estimate that number of hours that we probably would need to spend in internal technician time. And if we do that, we're going to say 10 minutes per PC, 20 PCs. That roughly runs out to about 3 1/3 hours. If we have 2 servers, and we're going to estimate about 30 minutes of our internal time per server, that's another hour. And then we're going to add 1 more hour, as I mentioned, so that we have properly budgeted time to complete a quarterly business review. So that ends up to be around 5 1/3 hours per month that we should build into our pricing bundle to cover our internal labor. 5 1/3 hours, if we're using $140 an hour, would come to be about $750. Now that should be included in our monthly bundle as a reasonable estimate to cover estimated internal tech time. And I always say this, I say, if you know, because you have a track record of time and you've been in the IT business for 20 years and you've been servicing a certain sector and you know in your heart of hearts that, hey, this customer, given where it is, given what they do, it's not going to be 5 hours a month. I think it'll be more. Always defer to that institutional knowledge that you have. Barring that, this is as good a estimate to start with as any. Many times we're just getting into the IT business, especially if we have our roots in telephony or maybe office equipment, and we're building an IT department. For lack of actual, real, years-long institutional knowledge, this is a great estimate to begin with, and it is pretty darn accurate in the grand scheme of things. So that's the labor. Let's price up our outsourced services with that roughly 50% gross margin. So I won't go through all these, but this would be our just ballpark technical outsource of help desk, servers under ConnectWise, command support, and if we add cybersecurity like dark web monitoring and some of the Fortify products that ConnectWise offers, this would be the rough and dirty cost to you as the dealer, $1,200 or so, and then just a little under $2,400 would be the extended price. Now individually, and you can see that Office 365, we're not getting 50% there, but we're doing a little better on other products. Typically, the server support runs about $48 under this provider, but we typically sell that for somewhere between $150 to $250 a month. So you get better than 50% gross margins. But on the net, we'd like to be at least in the ballpark within a few percentage points of that 50% level when we average out all of our outsource. So where do we get? The out-the-door price to the customer would be approximately this amount. We would have our outsourced services. We would have our internal tech time, so really any time built in to cover anything that does not get handled by an outsourced help desk or outsourced server support. So we would do a quote in the realm of around $3,000, $3,100, and this would end up being about $155 per user or per employee per month. Now, this does not include backup solution because backup solutions are really based on customer configuration needs. We don't have an estimate for that. If you look at an architecture firm with plenty of AutoCAD and lots of graphics that need to be stored, then that's going to be a lot more than a 20-person, real estate office. So it really depends on the industry they're in and their needs. So we would actually have a BCDR quote based on their needs actually on top of this quote. Okay, and if we price in this manner, this is where we get to 50% gross margins, and this is not every month, but this is on average over time. Each month really depends on the needs of the customer. Some months it might be very light and there might be no service calls. Other months you might have to expend a lot of labor. But if you look at it over the course of several quarters or a year, if we price in this manner, we should be good on the average. And this allows us to get to that 35% contribution that we mentioned, is that if we have an estimate of around 15% of sales going to sales costs, that would go to pay for the salesperson's base commission, the sales manager, if you have one, the labor load and the benefits for all those folks, and then also your marketing, advertising, sales collateral budgets, those kinds of things. All in all, if you spend about 15%, you'll land at 35% contribution. And then that brings us to 20% EBITDA if we have roughly 15% overhead. And that includes all administrative costs, and we always include an owner's salary in that. So when we do the analysis, if let's say the owner does not take a salary through payroll, let's say they just take it through distributions, we'll make an estimate for that so to make sure we're comparing apples to apples so that one company is not assuming an owner's salary and then the next comparable company doesn't have any salary for owner, then we'll normalize those to make sure we're comparing equal expense structures. Okay. So quick recap, and we'll get to introduce John Ekstrom here for a little bit of his perspective, and then we'll have some questions. So successful MSPs should yield that 35% contribution and be kind of in the realm of 20 to 25% EBITDA overall. With proper pricing, the cost, any cost issues really can be overcome. Like you can do some things not that great and still be okay. If we underprice, it can prevent us from being profitable no matter how efficient, no matter how good we are at what we do. We're kind of putting ourselves in a hole when we underprice. So the key metric is to price in a manner that allows us to obtain 50% gross margins. We obtain that average of 50% gross margins on the outsourced product, and then we have to do it, get 50% gross margins on our internal man hours by pricing properly with 140 rough dollars an hour if your technicians are paid on average $30. And then making sure we have the properly budgeted number of hours for the proposal that we have in front of us. I always mention this. We present the quote as kind of um, basically an all-in. Here's all the services you get, and here's the price. We typically don't break it out as to here's your markup on this product, here's your markup on this product. Obviously, some of you may know that may be a very goes without saying type of comment, but we always want to present what the employee or the customer is going to get in terms of services and deliverables, and what the out the door cost is. What we talk about in terms of number of hours that we're going to include and how we're marking up our outsourced products, obviously that's for us internally. And then lastly, on the efficiency, the one metric we wanted to touch on today was maintain that 75% deployed time in our technical staff. Okay, so John Ekstrom, I'd like to introduce here. He's the president and CEO of CBE, Carolina Business Equipment, located in South Carolina. John, if you want to take yourself off mute. Wanted to introduce him. He's a TAG member for a few years now, probably I think going on 4 years. We have helped his organization build and improve their IT business. So John, I'd like to introduce you there, and if you could maybe just give us a few of your thoughts on kind of how this methodology, at least in the terms of improving your IT business, has been from TAG, and what we've done to help you improve that part of your business. Are you there, John? All right, we might have lost John. That's okay. John, if you're there, you can unmute. There we go. Hey, John? We might be having some technical difficulties there. Okay.
Yep. Hey, so Tim, while we're trying to get John connected, I do have a question from the group. If you'd like to take that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
See if we get John. We'll see if we can get John to jump in here. When you were talking about, yep. So when we were talking about the utilization of technicians, one of our attendees asked, well, what if your techs are also doing internal infrastructure work for you? How would they log that time, and would that change the 75% utilization target?
It would not, because at least in our experience, what we've found is that time spent working on an internal network is easily absorbed in that 25% of non-customer facing time. So that is one of the items that we would assume would be, because every company has it, right? We have to work on our own network. We have to work on our own phone system if we're in the telephony business, and that time is obviously time that needs to be spent. But we would include that in the 25% downtime estimate. And that's okay, even if you have one person and you say, well, gosh, this one person's spending half their time working on the internal network. That's okay, because overall you probably have, a half dozen other technicians that are not working on the network, and they may have a little bit more deployed time because the one person is doing most of that work. So we wouldn't recommend adjusting it unless you have some sort of very, very unique situation.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. I think the group, I'm going to see if anybody else has any questions. I only see that one popped up, and unless Mr. Ekstrom, it looks like we got his video now. John, you with us now? We can't hear you though, sir. So if the group has any other questions, I'll take them.
Yeah, put them in the chat box, and if there's any questions we can't get to, I will have a record of those, and I can certainly circle back to any questions that get asked directly via an email potentially to talk to you about that.
Great.
Okay. All righty. Well, please feel free to put those in. I apologize. We seem to have lost John on this. I think there's been a couple of audio issues, it appears, on this call, so we apologize for that. My email and phone number is on the screen in front of you, and I'm happy to take any phone call or email. Please reach out to me if there's anything you would like to learn about what TAG does, how we help folks in the IT and other technology industries. If there's anything you think that we may be able to do for you, if you just want to learn about our program, please reach out anytime, and we can certainly get you whatever information you need on our organization, what we do, how we do it, what the cost is, all those things that may be running through your mind. And this is what we do, and we, in terms of what we do that we're pretty good at. We've done an excellent job of taking folks in other industries, primarily telephony, telecommunications, phone systems, folks that have had their roots in that industry, and then also folks that are coming up on the copier, office equipment type side of the house, and brought them into this world of IT and kind of shown them how to build an IT business, how to build the department from a staffing perspective, how to get out of the gates pricing it. So we've been very successful with bringing folks from other technologies and being able to bring them IT as a business that they can also offer to their clients. So, any other questions?
Hey, yep, we got a few more. We got a few more here, Tim. Well, we got a couple minutes left.
Sure.
So one of our questions was they noticed that they were asking as to your question on the backups and how you manage time on that. And they're saying, hey, backups critical. Do you have a suggestion for how you estimate for the cost of backups and all that stuff? Do you have a recommendation there?
Yeah, it's a pretty small number, but backups, firewalls, switches, really any equipment that we're managing, when we build a financial model, it will typically have a very small, hourly addition to that. Obviously, PCs and servers are where the vast bulk of time, gets spent. So it's not fairly material. And if we're getting a 50% gross margin, even if we're not adding on top of that an additional amount for the, for potentially service calls on BCDR or on firewalls or those types of things, if you're getting the right price, you're typically covered, because even if you did spend a little time, you've really got enough margin in there that you can do it. So the answer is yes. I don't have all those numbers right in front of me, but we would typically build in a small amount for that. But I would focus on making sure that if you look at your total outsourced cost, which includes a little bit of everything, the Office 365 to the BCDR and everything in between, and the amount of dollars that you're building into your managed services offering, if in general that's close to 50%, then you should be okay. That's really the most important thing. Now, will we add a little bit of extra time to service those items? We would.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that input. And then a question was relative to Tim, relative to if you do your own internal help desk, if you have a time allocation number per PC or endpoint, if you will, and per server. For the people do internal help desk.
Yeah. So that's a little longer conversation because there's a lot to it. But in general, if I can give you this, remember when we talked about the amount of time per PC and per server? Yep. If you're doing it all internally, then obviously you're not going to have the cost of that outsource. So the amount of your outsource goes down. But my internal time goes up because every single call comes to me, right? So the 10 minutes per PC is actually going to be, in an internal help desk scenario, about 30 minutes per PC instead of 10 minutes. So what the thought process is there is that we know this. Statistically, it takes about 30 minutes per PC per month in service calls. That's the average. When we're in an outsourced scenario, we're going to assume that 2/3 of that time is going to get picked up by the help desk. So if you're doing it internally, 30 minutes per PC, and the same method for the servers. It's going to take about an hour and a half per server per month of time to update, service, do any remediation, anything you need to do. And so the hour and a half when we outsource becomes 30 minutes because, again, we assume conservatively that at least 2 out of 3 of the calls that happen are going to get picked up by your help desk. Now, ideally, it would be more. We'd like to have better than 66% getting handled by an outsource. I mean, in a perfect world, it should be 75 to 85, but we model it based on a 2/3 model. So real quick and dirty, that's the way we would build it up. We would build 30 minutes per server, an hour and a half, 30 minutes per PC and an hour and a half per server. And then there's some other items that would roll into that if you're doing it outsourced, or not outsourced, but internal. But that would give you at least an hourly benchmark to use as you build an MSP proposal.
Tim, can you hear me now?
Great.
Yeah, there's John.
Mr.
There we go.
Hi, Mr. Ekstrom.
Hello there, sir. How in the world are you, man?
I'm awesome. So welcome, welcome.
I apologize for that little snafu here. CIO was in here poking around. He didn't find. I started poking on buttons, and voila, here we are. How cool is that? So, John, if I'd have known I was sharing the stage with you too, I'd have really been looking forward to this, man. So, as we got this thing started, Tim talked about this being the solution he was showing where things were outsourced. We have most everything in-house right now, but when we were going through a growth phase, thank you, TAG, we were using John's organization to help with our overflow. So we got to a point where we could not bring anybody else new on, and that was a painful thing to have to stop doing. But John and his group came to the rescue. So thank you. Great organization there as well. So for everybody that was on this call listening to Tim, in a way, I know it looked like he went into some painful detail on things, but in another way, he was very high level on what gets done. Kind of amusing to me, and I'll tell you why I think it's amusing. It's not like it's just an accounting joke, which aren't really funny, but I am an accountant, and I used to think I was one of the best ones in the industry, and I held that wrong belief for a long, long time until I was able to sit at Tim's feet and learn some things. So there's some really cool things that TAG does and that whole group does at TAG. The big thing is that I think you can pick up on from the presentation that Tim gave is the depth of understanding that they have. And he talked about these different matrix numbers that you look at. And as we inside our company started looking at things, I thought I had it all dialed in pretty well. Particularly when we're looking at the manpower thing. So from a people standpoint, we had it right. Our payroll numbers were off, and what it pointed to me was that we just did not have the right level of people. You heard Tim talk about getting people on the bus, right people on the bus, and then the right seats on the bus. Those of you that done a little reading, good to great. Jim Collins, it's a great book, great management book, but that's a concept that comes out of there. The fact of the matter is Tim and the whole group there at TAG really know their stuff. I hope this stuff that Tim was coming with did not sound at all silly or braggadocious. It's just information that he was laying out there, and he did a very efficient job of doing it. I'll tell you the huge differentiator, and we have engaged other consulting groups in the past. The huge differentiator, though, is the fact that everybody that I have engaged with at TAG, and I've been engaged with absolutely every employee out there, these guys care. And that is something that I know, I'm assuming there's a lot of business owners that are on the phone here. That is something that you cannot buy. When you have to try to develop a team to come around you, you know that is a long, hard process to develop. You look to make sure you get the right people, and then it's a constant work to develop that. Just that I give a rip type attitude, the mentality that these guys have. And this is something that is just absolutely part of the very fiber and being of everybody that's seen TAG. So there's not enough good stuff I can say about that organization. The transformational things that they have done with me have been very exciting. You know, I don't think their job is to take a bad company and somehow make them good. Their job is to take a good company and make them great. I think they did that with us. We did not have a very bad bottom line, and we did not have really great top line sales. Both those have changed. Our top line sales have been on an upward trajectory. Our bottom line, now we're in the low 20%, and I do have a very heavy corporate burden allocation that I put on each of the departments, and the IT is no exception exception of that. So, Tim, to you and your group, thank you for what you've done to help make us a more successful company in the IT space.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate that. And, like you said, our passion is making businesses better. We couldn't put it better myself. That's what we eat, sleep, and breathe every day. It's our reason for getting out of bed in the morning is we'd like to show folks in various industries what's possible and then do everything we can to help them get there. So if anybody out there is considering what we may be able to do for you, if you want to learn more about us, again, my contact information is there, and happy to hear from anybody who's on this call. So thank you very much, folks.
Great.
And I think John will be in touch with information on the recording as well.
Exactly, everyone. And we just launched a quick poll for the group, a group there. So if you're still on the call, and we always ask this question: do you want to speak to ConnectWise? In this case, it'll mean, do you want to speak to TAG? So if you answer yes to that poll, we'll pass that information on to Tim and Brian and all the gang there at TAG. And if you answer no, we won't bother you. How's that sound? That sound fair, Tim?
Yeah, sounds good. We appreciate your attendance, and thanks again. And thank you, John, for handling this with us, because we've been a partner with ConnectWise for a long, long, long time, and great company to partner with, and we appreciate all you do for our membership.
Great, and everybody be careful out there too with the cyber bullies out there running around. And John Ekstrom, thanks for joining us, and thanks to, we had a little over 100 attendees today, so thanks to those 100 people for taking time out of their day.
Sounds great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you now.
Have a nice day.
Great.